Our next panel talks about a challenge that is very much of the moment. It's about Israel in the media, what no one will tell you. Again, this is one of those panels planned months ago. Turns out it is one of the most relevant conversations we all could be having right now. In 2019, the Pew Research Center found that over half of Americans got their news from social media, either sometimes or often. And a current Pew study finds that a third of TikTok users say they get their news on the platform. You could find that depressing, you could find that whatever, it is true, and we need to acknowledge it and adapt and adjust. So at a time when disinformation and misinformation is proliferating across all social media platforms, I've seen it, I'm sure all of you have seen it, this is a challenge that creates an environment for anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism to soar on and offline. We're really, really seeing this right now. Our next panel will explore the effect of social media on anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and discuss how we can combat negative messages and false information. I'm so excited. I will be watching this panel because it's being moderated by the amazing Melissa Weiss. She is the executive editor of Jewish Insider, which covers US politics, philanthropy, and business news with a Jewish angle. She's based in Tel Aviv, and this year was named to Hadassah's inaugural list of 18 American Zionist women you should know. Take it away, Melissa.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. We're just going to get right into it. I'll introduce our speakers, and then I think we'll have a really interesting conversation today. I do want to begin by issuing a quick disclaimer, which is that both Emily and I are in Tel Aviv, and as has been the case for the last 2.5 weeks, rockets can be fired at Tel Aviv at any point in the evening, and very often are. So in the event that there are sirens and rockets, we will grab our laptops and run, or we will have to close our laptops and be back with you shortly. So we're hopeful that we can get through the next hour without that happening, but there are never any guarantees here in Israel. So with that, I'll introduce Emily. Emily Schrader is an Israeli human rights activist, international speaker, and senior correspondent for Ynet News based here in Tel Aviv. With over 175,000 social media followers, Emily is known for providing concise answers to tough questions related to Israel's political and historical reality through social media. She was also included in Hadassah's 18 American Zionist Women You Should Know list. Emily is a regular commentator in the international media about Iran, Israel, and women's rights. She's a very fun person to have on your trivia team. I can speak from personal experience. And Mosheh Oinounou is an award-winning journalist who has 20 years of experience as a reporter and executive producer at CBS, Fox News, Bloomberg TV, Condé Nast Entertainment, and CNBC. Mosheh is the founder of Mo News, a social-first news organization that breaks down headlines and provides nonpartisan analysis on Instagram, as well as a daily podcast and newsletter. A fun fact, the first time Mosheh and I met was actually in a bomb shelter when he was here in Tel Aviv earlier this year. So not much has changed, unfortunately, but next time, hopefully in better times. And so with that, let's get right into it. There is a lot of disinformation, misinformation happening these days. Where are the two of you getting your news from? Where does the most factual news come from? Emily, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I am a huge fan of Hadassah, have been for many years. And so it's great to be here with, hundreds of people who are following and interested in what's going on here. In terms of where I'm getting information, I'm sure that the two of you will agree with me. Right now is crazy. Things are going so fast. Everything is hard to verify. And in the age of AI, I mean, the way that things are going, it's like you never know anymore. You never know. It's becoming, I think, more difficult than it's ever been to know that the material you're seeing or getting, or even the sources that are reporting, are accurate. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges for us when it comes to Israel, but even internationally. I think a lot of times in the media, we have reporters who just don't know, and we aren't able to know all of the information. And so there's a lot of misinformation that comes out about what's happening on the ground in Israel, and not all of it is ill-intentioned. Some of it, it's difficult to understand. This is not a black and white conflict, even though the issue with Hamas is black and white. It's not a black and white conflict. It's very complex. There's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of history. You can have a PhD in this conflict and you still won't understand everything about what's going on. I've gotten a lot of my information from sources that I have both inside Gaza and the Palestinian side, so firsthand from them, what they're seeing and what they're hearing. And then also from the IDF, from government sources with what's happening now. And of course, we're also looking at social media. But as I started out by saying, it's really hard to know. It's really hard to verify. So a lot of times, we'll see something or we'll receive information. We have to go back and check, and we have to verify with the IDF, and they don't always get back to us in time. So it's difficult. I think it's harder than ever. And I've seen quite a few people whom I very much professionally respect make mistakes. Mistakes happen. And the important part, I think, is to do your due diligence and do as much as you can, but also understand that, even some of the best journalists are making mistakes when it comes to what's being reported now, because the speed of information of what's coming out is just so fast. The fog of war, So it's difficult, more challenging than ever, but it is possible. And eventually, I believe that the truth about all of these issues that come up will come out.
Sure. Mosheh.
Yeah, just to jump on that, I mean, reporting during war, reporting on war is complex as it is. And, I've done it from the perspective of producing news at networks, and things are murky. There are going to be, multiple lines coming at you. In this case, you have a non-state actor in Hamas as one of the key sources there. The issue that a lot of Western journalists, and I was talking to some of my former colleagues at various networks, they have right now is the lack of info on the ground in Gaza. So that continues to sort of be a black hole of information for a number of networks. Now they have, various what they call fixers, producers on the ground who they've hired, but some of them aren't able to verify certain things. And there's certain challenges in reporting things in an environment where the leadership happens to be Hamas. It's the same issues we deal with at a different level, reporting from Afghanistan, reporting from Iran, reporting from Russia. And so I think one thing that the audience just needs to understand is that whether it's, internationally recognized organizations, whether it's the BBC, New York Times, CNN, or it's, people on the ground, or it's governments, it requires, rega, a little bit of patience, right? And unfortunately, we live in an era here of social media where everything needs to be known immediately. I mean, we saw it part and parcel with the hospital, the hospital parking lot explosion, right? That was a hospital explosion, et cetera. And what that set off in a matter of minutes globally. And the media, I mean, listen, some people are rightfully critical of reporters and journalists out there. I know many reporters and journalists that are trying to get it right, that are trying to keep up with the pace of social media, who are predisposed to X said the following, Hamas said the following, Israel claims the following. And in this case, again, you have varying levels of confidence, to put it politely, in the various folks you're getting information from. And then add to that, I don't mean to be depressing here, but you have a bunch of people with blue checks. Blue checks are buyable now, they're purchasable. So ultimately, whether it's Twitter or Instagram, well, it's blue check, this must be legit. Absolutely not. In fact, some of those people are doing the most amount of damage because that's no longer a level of reputable information. So I think for everyone out there, it's if you see something, what other sources are reporting it? Can you take a moment to, see if it's being verified in multiple places? What have the various governmental entities or third parties said about this? And in an era of 24/7, minute by minute, that might take 12, 24 hours if you have it.
Yeah, I mean, really, what surprised me the most, I'm glad you brought up the hospital parking lot. What surprised me the most, I was walking home and I looked on Twitter and I saw there had been rockets coming over at Tel Aviv all night. So we knew that there was something going on. And I looked at my phone and I saw Hamas, or the Gaza Ministry of Health says a hospital was hit by an Israeli airstrike, 500 killed. And I thought, that's wild. That happened 15 minutes ago. How did they
Yep.
already know? And what was just so, it was common sense. And it made me wonder, there are 2,000 foreign press on the ground in Israel right now covering this conflict. 2,000. How did no one say, how did they know that so fast? We are, what, 2.5 weeks after October 11th, and we still don't know how many people were killed. So things like that. Sometimes, I think reporters, sometimes they have the best intentions, but they lose sight of reality and of basic logic.
There's, I mean, an adage that we used to have in the newsrooms I worked in, which is it's better to be right than first. In some
Yes.
cases, it's the reverse for many journalists that feel like, well, they have it, and so they must have it. But when you look at it, I mean, for example, I was on a briefing yesterday with John Kirby, the national security spokesperson at the White House. You might have seen his briefings daily now. And he was asked by one of the people, one of the reporters who was on with me, like, what do you make of Ministry of Health numbers coming out of Gaza? And he's like, let's be very clear. This is Hamas numbers, right? They're the Ministry of Health. And we're skeptical. And we've had experience where they've thrown a number out like 800 or 900, and the death toll has been 47. And so it ultimately, without third-party verification, you have that in the West Bank. You do not have that in the Gaza Strip. And that's just something everyone needs to be cautious of. And that's not to negate the tragedy that's happening to civilians and the deaths that are happening, but it requires which is very difficult for people right now, a separation of logic and emotion. And that, unfortunately, is very difficult in a time of war. And by the way, Israel, this is not unique. We saw the same situation happening in Ukraine and Russia in terms of misinformation, the amount of fake nonsense that was coming out of Russian bots in the first couple of weeks. And we're still seeing it from the region there. For example, you remember the dam explosion in Ukraine several months ago. We still don't know who did it. We don't know who did it. Was it the Ukrainians trying to blame the Russians? Was it the Russians doing it? And so there's going to be things that for the rest of time, hopefully not for the rest of time, but for a long time, you might not know exactly what took place there because things are unfolding so quickly.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to flag for everyone who's tuned in today, Bret Stephens at the New York Times had a great op-ed that was published this morning that really looked at the degree to which Palestinian authorities, not the Palestinian Authority, but authorities in the Palestinian Authority in Gaza have conflated numbers, have adjusted what they have told foreign media because they themselves are under pressure from Hamas, from government officials. So it's a really interesting read that really it feeds into what we're talking about.
They know that as the number goes up, it's good. It's good PR in a real sadistic way.
Oh, absolutely. Well, now that we're on the conversation about misinformation, we've seen a ton of it, frankly, especially on X, formerly known as Twitter. Just before war broke out, Elon Musk did an X Spaces with a number of rabbis and Jewish officials, and it really seemed like the Jewish community was taking X seriously, and maybe X was starting to take the Jewish community seriously. But now we are 2.5 weeks into this war. There's a clear effort to promote misinformation about what is happening here on the ground. Should X respond? If so, how? Where do we go from here on that platform?